information my reps.
Here we go.
Anyway, sorry. Start.
Okay, so the microphone's actually in the computer, so you should be fine, but please.
That's being pretty loud.
Yeah, you're good. No, everybody's good. Okay, so welcome back. I think this is our fourth career fair preparation series event. Fourth or fifth? No, it's the fourth one. Today we're doing what recruiters want. So we have several on our panel who are going to help us out here. We have Colton Comalander here in the middle. He's an account executive at Medasource, Reagan Knightstep. On the far, that would be my left, you're right. Also an account executive at Medasource. And then Leslie Peoples, who is a senior recruiter and talent acquisition advisor. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Neha is actually going to be moderating, so she will come down and get us rolling.
I have questions up too. Did y'all want to start or I can? Anyone have any questions first? Okay, I can start with a question. So I know Leslie answered this before in the first event, but I wanted to ask all of you guys, what is like a pet peeve that you see when it comes to people like applicants? Like something that you've seen that just kind of grinds your gears?
Do you want me to take that first?
Up to you if you have for it.
Why don't you go ahead?
We'll let the solo guy go.
Yeah, I'd say, well, one of the biggest things for me that it's not necessarily with a resume or your background or your skill sets, but the way the market moves right now is very quick for job positions across the country. So just being sure that, and we know that with y'all being students and coming out of college, that we have to be flexible with maybe your hours or anything like that, but just being timely in your responses and be checking LinkedIn occasionally. Someone might have an opportunity that's ready to go for you. And then also when you're setting meetings with a recruiter to talk about an opportunity, make sure that you show up on time, ready to go for that interview, because a lot of times that is your first stage to get through to the actual company that's doing the hiring. And so if you don't impress them, even if it may seem like a little quick 15-minute phone conversation in between classes, just always become prepared and come on time to that. And if you can't make it, always give an answer like, hey, I'm sorry, I need a push. And it's always no problem. We have busy schedules too, but it's always tough. And if you end to like miss or something like that, or skip one of those time periods, it's almost going to be kind of an automatic nix for us when moving through that next phase in like the process.
I would say for me, it is a little bit of a stickler for me if a person doesn't know the company that I'm representing. But if I tell them, this is what our company does, the manager is going to ask you this question, and they don't know that, and they didn't take the time to actually prepare, that's a real turn off.
I would say biggest pet peeve, and this is going to seem like it's common sense, but it happens all the time. Ghosting. Don't ghost your recruiters. Y'all don't like getting ghosted on a date. We don't like getting ghosted about a job. So be responsive, even if it's something that if you look more into the job and you decide that this isn't for me, I want something different. You can always take that call with the recruiter because they've already set aside time and they might have a different opportunity for you if you just verbalize that, or be respectful of their time also and let them know, hey, after thinking about it, I don't think that this is the right position for me. Don't just ghost someone. At least do the courtesy of reaching back out to them and letting them know that it's not the right opportunity for you.
I did notice that more people have come in. Did y'all have any questions for them before I go on to mine? Okay.
I have a quick one. So could you just describe how the overall process even works when you're dealing with talent acquisition or anything like that with a company? Is it like when I apply, what happens? Or if you come and find me, I mean, how does all that work?
I guess I'll take this first. Sure. I guess, and this is just kind of a pro tip for all of the people about to apply for jobs. LinkedIn is your best friend. If you can network on LinkedIn, please do. We love receiving messages from people looking for a job. It shows that you're active, you're eager, you're hungry. But as far as I can speak to Medasource's process specifically, what we do is whenever we reach out to someone or someone reaches out to us, we'll initially set up a quick phone call, usually 15 minutes or so, get to know you, tell you more about the position, make sure it's a great fit. After that, if we decide to move forward, we'll set up another, I personally like to set a Teams interview, or it could just be another quick phone call. just to double check before we are able to send things to hiring managers. After that, then it's up to whichever client we're working with in their process. So it might be one interview, one and done, you're ready to go. Could be a couple different interviews, but you will know that at the beginning of the process in that initial conversation, what the entire process is going to look like specific to the position that you're applying to.
I would say for me, a resume comes in. And if I'm interested in the qualifications, I do a brief screen to see if the qualifications that I'm looking for, my managers are looking for, are there. And then I would send a note requesting an interview or a short kind of, let's talk a little bit. Again, we start talking, I introduce our company. I talk about basic skills. I want to know what the people that I'm talking with, what they're looking for. Maybe, and that might include in a position, maybe what are they looking for in terms of work-life balance? Just kind of doing a brief phone screen. Qualification is what we usually call it. And then from there, if that looks good, then I tell the person that I'd like to set up a phone screen with them and the manager, and I get that all set up. If I'm not sure or I don't think there's going to be a match, and typically we'll say something like, this is important too, I think, for them to know what's going on when we say we don't immediately set something up. For me, I might say something like, well, I really appreciate the time you shared with us. If there's an interest, then I'll be back in touch within a certain amount of time. And I always welcome people to get back in touch with me if they want to talk a little bit more. But generally, that's what happens. After the phone screen with me, then I forward the resume on to the manager. And for me, I'm a real stickler with managers because I know that it's a hot market and people can disappear, ghost. They can do different things. And sometimes that ghosting is real innocent. People are just uncomfortable. They don't know what to say, and it's easier to just hide. But she's right. Don't do that. It's a really small world. And you never know. She could go to the next company that you really want to work for, and you just blew it. She won't forget that. I bet.
We take notes.
So anyway, with the manager, then the recruiter is typically, hey, you need to get in touch with this person. The manager's not responding. They're back there in the backgrounds pushing and trying to get things ready, and then we get it set up.
And yeah, another thing to add too, obviously, both those processes are pretty similar. Obviously, she spoke on ours. One of the things too, just from the background of like different avenues to like get in front of someone who's in the recruiting and HR team for the client or working with third-party company like ourselves is not only do we have different job postings out there that will have what you can look through to see if a certain job matches your skill sets, if that's something that you may want to apply for, and feel free to always do that. And obviously the recruiter that posted that will always be going through there to do their due diligence to match profiles and move you through the process. But also, I would always have your LinkedIn profile ready to go. I know she talked about the importance of that a little bit, but just having like an updated copy of your resume actually on your LinkedIn profile, having an up-to-date cell and email number, and just up-to-date experience. Because a lot of times for us too, sometimes job postings are a little bit too slow in the way that our clients need to move to hit their goals. So we will oftentimes reach out on the market and reach out directly to LinkedIn that are either open to work or in their jobs and looking to end up contracts and move on to that next opportunity. So I would always have that ready to go. And always when we're reaching out on LinkedIn, it can always be easy to see. And obviously with everyone working or taking classes, you don't want to have to take too much time to respond back to all these different recruiters' positions. But if a position really does interest you, or it may be a designed path that you may want to take down the road or shows interest, respond back to them and actually take the time to set up 5, 10, 15-minute conversation. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour. Even if it's something that intrigues you, reach out and don't just respond back with like, what's the salary? Is it remote? Is it this? And like, I know that like can really be an easy ticker to say, oh, I'm not interested because it is not remote. Or if it's not hit my salary goals, I don't want it, doesn't make sense. But you never know what opportunity I may also have in my back pocket that I'm like, okay, shit. Excuse me. You had that opportunity. I may have for you. Sorry. That you have one that's ready to go for you. And so you always want to explore those different opportunities because you never know what's out there. Or like I said, we also work with not only the healthcare system that has that job posted, but the 6 other top healthcare systems in the country. So if you turn back on that, it's sometimes hard to move through the process with other job opportunities.
Do we pay you or who pays you?
The clients, yeah, so for us at least, we only bill time and materials. So we're free to do market consulting with our clients. We consult for projects, what the market for candidates looks like, and all of that is free to use. And working with y'all on our different Elevate programs to bring in associate level talent, it's all free to use. We just bill our clients based off.
So you guys can talk to us anytime.
Yeah, and I can tell you too, as an employer, if I would never work with a company that was making people pay a fee, I would never do that.
Thank you.
I can say this one. So let's say I did an interview with you guys, right? You finished the interview and I haven't heard back in a bit. About what time period after the interview is appropriate to be like, hey, am I through or not? How did I do? That connection.
I can say from my company, probably about 2 weeks. Typically, though, we respond and the managers that I've worked with, we work really close together. And that's a big stickler for me. I want people to know this is what's going to happen and this is a reasonable time that you can anticipate hearing from us. But I would say generally about 2 weeks, because sometimes there can be other things going on in the background. An additional candidate comes in, or we're considering someone internally, or the regs get on hold. I'm sure you've had that with your clients too, that, so I'd say about that, right?
I want to hear your timeline.
Yeah.
Because I
Yes.
feel like ours are gonna be very similar, but mine might be. I just got out of the recruiting seat, so this is all very fresh for me. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to hear yours.
And so my only difference from that is, and like I said, it goes going off that like 2 weeks, never a bad time, because obviously you never know what's going on the client side. And if it may not be that you may be a great person for the job, but that manager got pulled to another project. So you never know what the client's actually going through on a day-to-day basis. But as far as that, for some of us, if it does take 2 weeks before like you reach out or we get back to you, there's a pretty good chance that opportunity is gone and that it's been filled by another company that's working with them. Their HR has filled it and their internal group has filled it. So that 2 week period is a little bit tough. One thing I would encourage y'all to do is ask that question to your recruiter or that HR is like, hey, when is a good time for me to follow up for this position to make sure that I'm still, like, ask them a position, see what their timeline is. Most of them tell you, like, if I haven't heard from you in the past couple days, reach back out to me end of week and we'll get that touch point. And even if we don't have anything for you, we'll at least provide you with what that next step should be. But just maybe ask that question to them and see.
Yeah, and I would say that the internal recruiters should have a really strong relationship with you. If they haven't been back in touch with you, that's poor form.
Agreed.
Agreed. I would say as far as, and this goes for like my personal candidates, because it was something that I constantly said was, I expect you guys to reach back out to me within 24 to 48 hours. To just shoot me an email and say, hey, I follow-up emails. Pro tip, ask to send follow-up emails to your hiring managers that you just had an interview with. You can email your recruiter, be like, hey, could you please forward this on to the hiring manager? Because we can't give out their information yet until you work for them. Love to do that. It looks great on you guys. It shows that you're very professional. You're very interested. Just shoot me an email and say, hey, can you forward this on to them in the next like 24 to 48 hours, keeps you fresh in their mind. As far as when you should hear back from us about the position, it's going to change with every single job. I usually, and I know Colton and I try to, in the account executive seat, put some pressure on our hiring managers to make that decision sooner rather than later. I try to get, I would say after an interview, try to get people in within the next, like have an answer within the next like few days to a week, because it is moving extremely fast right now, which is great for you guys. Y'all are trying to get jobs at the right time. But I would say probably you guys follow up within 24 to 48 hours. I would expect to have you an offer within 3 days to a week max. And that's just kind of like, I guess on our side, because we tend to move a little bit faster.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. How do you, like, when you follow up, what do you say? I mean, is it okay just to write, hey, what's up? Like, I mean,
It depends on your relationship with your recruiter. I am very, laid back with my candidates. Cause I understand that I'm only a couple years removed from you guys. I'm actually UTD alum, so go Comets. And for me, a lot of y'all will have my phone number also. You can shoot me a text and say, hey, just wanted to follow up if there's any news on next steps. And if you say that, that's great. It doesn't have to be super big and elaborate and formal. We're all human and I will sometimes forget to follow up. So I usually put calendar reminders, whether they happen or not, TBD. So you guys following up really shows that you have a lot of interest in that certain position.
Okay. And then how do you feel if somebody goes around you to try to talk to the hiring manager? Is that?
That's a big no-go. I say that though whenever we're on the phone.
Yeah, so like, are you saying like they would have had a conversation with us as like the recruiting team?
And then they like look up someone's email.
The direct manager goes straight to them. Well, most of the time too, if we think that they're going to be a fit for the position, we'll have them sign an RTR off the bat, but that's just protecting us. But I mean, as far as
What is an
reaching,
RTI?
so it's, oh, sorry, I apologize. Yeah, that's a right to represent form. So like if we talk to you and you're actually a fit for the job, we'll most likely have you sign that off the bat, showing that like we found you first. You would work with us through the process, which is really no different than working directly. It's just different managers like to work with different groups and based off of like what their skill sets of their positions are. Sometimes it's easier to work with a vendor that's more specialized within that versus maybe their internal HR who's very good at what they do, but doesn't typically work on a difficult skill set as much. And so it's slower to find those resources. So we'll move that way, but
Do people typically try to do that with you? Go straight to.
I consider that working inside. If they do that, I haven't done my job. But it's different when you're working. There are people that I think sometimes that they can do that. They may feel like they can manipulate or go to several different companies and try and play one off the other. So if someone did that to me, probably, I don't think I'd shame them or make them feel bad. I just think it's an opportunity for me to re-educate them. Hey, this is my job. This is what the managers, or this is what they expect from me. So let's work together on that. But no, you don't do that.
and one other thing on that too is like if you did have a conversation with us and then you just went behind us and went and talked to them, we're probably not sending you to them and then you just almost lost one of your best chances to get in front of that hiring manager because you could get lost in the confusion, the shuffle, because probably 50 to 100 other people applied to that same role. And if like you send your resume directly to after you already had the conversation, I'm going to say that no to that person because you already went through the process with us and didn't ignored us. So therefore you might just get lost in the shuffle and never even have your opportunity, even if you were a good fit.
Right. And sometimes I've had it to where I've had a candidate that has come to me from Colton and then they send their resume directly. And boy, I don't like that.
It puts us in a really awkward position.
You get
Yeah,
it from Colton
I'm
and they
going
send the
to
resume
work with
directly to the
Colton.
hiring manager?
You're not increasing your chances by doing that. Is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. Colton has sent the resume to me and then all of a sudden I get a candidate that comes in on their own. Maybe they heard about it from him and they're trying to go through the back door. I don't like that. My relationship is going to be with him versus with that candidate.
Gotcha.
It's a character thing.
We're nice. We don't.
Yeah, we work together. Yeah, we work together. We're not trying to take from them.
Yeah.
We're supplementary to the program. too.
It's a
So,
whole
yeah.
team effort.
We're not trying to take from them. It's all for the good. You gotta remember that both of our jobs are all for the good of the client.
Mhm.
So like, we're gonna do, obviously, in our spots, we're all looking, I mean, obviously, we're commission based, so we make money off of our placements, which is true. I don't know if she has a similar structure at her client within Pfizer, but, so like, our only goal is to get the right process into the client, so.
Gotcha. So if even before reaching out to you all, if I just send my resume straight off to the hiring manager, do some homework, try to figure out who it is, and then send it to them, they refer me back to you all, is that,
I
does
actually.
that
had
work
that
against
happen.
me?
So I had someone who applied with one of my clients internally and then reached out to, or my recruiter reached out to them off of a job posting that they had applied to with us, same job and everything. And we weren't able to move forward with them because they had already reached out to the client directly. So I kind of had to say, hey, look, you're a great candidate. I can't move forward with you because you've already applied to them. So you kind of like, you lost your chance to go a very direct route. And now you're kind of, like Colton said, lost in the shuffle of being in this internal applicant pool that is not going to be as specialized. It's not going to be as small. You're not going to have like us going to bat for you. So if you apply internally, that's great. If you see our job posting and you still want to apply, best thing to do is be very, very upfront and honest. That's my one ask of everybody. That's my one ask of Colton and candidates is open communication. Let me know, hey, I applied to this job internally. Are there next steps that I should take? And then that's whenever we'll let you know. It's not really the process. We might be able to have a conversation, but overall it's an ownership thing and that's their internal HR's candidate now.
Yeah, and I would say too, that if that were to happen, because that does happen, that people can apply, you could apply to XYZ company. And you really want to work there. And then she has an opening and you go and think, well, I'm going, nothing hurt. I'm going to go ahead and send my resume there. I would just hope that you would tell them, hey, the best, just work with the company and I'll stay in touch with you about other things. Everybody's happy then.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
honest.
And if you have a great relationship with, like, if we had a great relationship with our internal HR at a client, then that's a conversation that we would have, like, hey, this person reached out to me, obviously they're eager. That's us being a little bit selfless on that, taking a step back because that's not our candidate. But at the end of the day, a recruiter's job, and y'all should all look for this with anybody that you work with, is to not only do what's best for the client, but do what's best for you guys.
And it makes me want to work with you even more.
Exactly.
If you call and say, hey, I want to look at this person, guess what? I'm going to really want to build my relationship there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot of good information. Wait, okay. I'll check it out. Anyway, since there's a lot more people, I wanna try to open the floor to questions again.
I promise we are very nice people. There are no dumb questions.
I don't know if this has already been answered or not, but is there anything specific you're looking for on a resume?
Anything specific on a resume? Honestly, and this may be a little more stringent to our positions, just because obviously when we're working, we're looking to move quickly for a resume. So we always like them to be cleaner and not fancy, jumbled around. Like I know that sometimes it'll look nice if you have like the bars on the side of your resume that have like your top skill sets listed out on the side. And this is just us working with the client. We're going to remove all that stuff and we're going to keep the skills in there, but we're going to remove all the fancy stuff from your resume. So just having a nice, easy to read template at y'all's experience level, one page is fine, I would assume, that really details all of your either work experience, your internship experience, your top skill sets, maybe technologies, program skill sets that you've learned, maybe highlighting one of your capstone projects that you've worked on will always be good. And just like making it clean and easy to read, because that's something we're always going to look through and probably change up because we want the client who's already going to be looking at a ton of different resumes to not have to search and find for what is important. So we'll probably also in our initial conversations go through you on your resume to ask what those big important things are that is most transferable skill sets to your next job. And we'll work with you to like kind of highlight where that needs to be in your resume already. But for the most part, just making sure it looks clean to us. Because we know you're right out of school and you don't have like years and years of work experience. Unless you do and you've been working, then add that in.
That was gonna be my question. Who in here has a job right now? Who is working to go into school? Yeah, my people. I also worked through both my degrees. Make sure that you add that on there. If any of you are athletes, 100% put that on there. Seeing people, whenever I look at a resume that were a babysitter or that were a server or held any kind of job, you were a tutor at the library while you were in school, it shows time management, shows that you can work hard. It gives you a little bit of separation from someone that might have the exact same skill set, but didn't also have to hold a job while they were in school. That's something that I love in my candidates. I'm also biased because that was me, so I feel y'all's pain. Make sure you highlight those. Some things that you think might not be a big deal, like, oh, well, why would they care that I was a babysitter my freshman year of college? We care because that shows us that you're willing to put in a little bit of extra time and effort and you're starting to set yourself up. So add that in there, especially if you're coming right out of school. We know that you haven't worked at a bunch of companies. Really what you've got is your degree. But if we see that, that gives us a little bit more oomph to put on that resume for you guys to kind of like help sell your story.
I agree. And I think diversity is so important now. Diversity means that continues to expand what that means. First generation college student, if that's you, put it on there. GPAs, very important. If it's a 3.0 or above, at least in my company, it has been. In any other engineering or science-based company that I've worked for, that they look for that. Let's see, what else? I think the capstone project, anything that has to do with leadership, professional organizations like for women, if you code, if you are as a SWE, any kind of professional organization that you are a part of, that's going to be important to include too. Agreed.
One other thing that I'll add on to that too, on the GPA front, she's right. If you have probably a lower than 3.0, I wouldn't put it on your resume. But, and this may be the difference in working directly with the client, working with an agency like us. I'm probably not looking at your resume, whether it's a 4.0. If you have it on there, like, it's not gonna make a difference for me. You graduated, you have the requisites. I'm gonna still hear what your skill sets are, because I personally, like, I don't know, like, I didn't put my resume or my GPA on my resume back in the day, never hindered me. I'm not really looking. Now, if you have a 4.0, sure, show that off. That's awesome. That's never going to be an issue. But like, maybe if you do have a lower GPA, or you don't want that, and you're not in the top of your class or that top 0.5%, like, maybe work your angles with an agency and show them your personality traits. And obviously, just because you had a high GPA or a low GPA doesn't mean you're not smart in your craft and know how to actually use that and applicate that in the field. There's a difference between the two. And so, and that's just saying, from my background, I don't care about the GPA, and I'll never ask you for it. I'll never promote that. And then, like, and I'm not saying to say, like, and if you have a 4.0 and it's on there, I'll keep it on there and send that over the resume, but that's not going to be when I write my candidate write up to send over to the hiring managers. Your 4.0 is probably not going to be on there from my perspective. Now, maybe it is, I'll show the background since you don't have prior work experience, but that's just from our background necessarily.
And I will say, like, if you don't want to put your GPA, but you had a really high GPA, you can put like magna cum laude, summa cum laude. You can always add that on there. That's a good way to like show off your GPA, but not show off the specific number. Coming from someone who has personally had both ends of the spectrum on my GPA, I never put my GPA on a resume. Because I wanted, partly because whenever I graduated undergrad, my GPA wasn't great and I didn't want to show it off. Whenever I graduated from UTD, my GPA was great. I still didn't really care to show it off because I wanted people to want me as a candidate for my skill set, for my personality, to make sure that I fit the culture of whatever company that I was applying to. That's very important. Make sure that you guys like who you're working for, or else you're just going to get burnt out and be very sad. So that's kind of like my take on the GPA thing. I like putting like the magna cum laude and cum laude on there better than I like the actual number, because that's something I'll probably like keep whenever I put their education.
Not saying I have bad grades or anything.
I mean, your undergrad GPA is better than mine.
But yeah, so yeah. Just there's lots of different opportunities. So don't think you're out of the box picture if you aren't higher, you're lower. Yeah, there's lots of different opportunities.
The job market now is so I feel like it's gotten so much better in the last few years. People are starting to be very like holistic within their application process. And I know that if any of you have friends that are pre-med, I know that they probably said, oh yeah, they have a holistic application process. This is actually holistic application processes. I never have cared about a candidate's GPA, but it's like, I think that that's probably the biggest difference between applying directly with somebody and that you guys might put a little bit more weight onto that than we do. And it's just differences of companies and how they work.
I want to ask a follow-up question with the resume one. So I've been seeing some people that have been wanting to put like ratings on their experience. For example, like if let's say they've done SolidWorks, right? But they haven't done it in a long time, so their skill set's kind of low. They were trying to put that in the resume somehow. Have you ever seen that? Are you partial to that? No?
I understand where you're coming from it. Honestly, I don't think it would hurt because that's always going to be a question to us when your resume comes through is we're going to go through. And obviously, if you have a technical background, you're going to want to put a lot of the different technical things that you either touched, worked on, have great experience in. And that's always going to be one of our first couple questions. It's like, okay, I see that you have this on here. What do you actually know with it? What have you done with it? And we'll get you to try and talk about it. So we'll understand pretty quickly if like you have just looked at it, seen it, and just put it on there to push the resume, or you understand that. So like, I don't think it's a terrible idea to rate, I guess, your skills, but like, you don't want to turn someone off if like you put a
Yeah.
3 there, but you really may know more than a 3. I just think that you could maybe end up hurting yourself in the ratings if you don't rate yourself high enough, or you put yourself in a bad position. But if you could find a way to put that on your resume, like my top skill sets are this, and this, and then what you've done within those skill sets, and then maybe I also have like experience working in these, or like like exposure to these, and then you might list those that you're not as strong in.
Just make sure you can justify the skills that you have on your resume. If you say that you're good at cooking and you burn toast, don't put that you're good at cooking on your resume.
And I can say too that, again, working with engineers, that they love to see anything that's quantitative. So if you could say something that you've done, not rating, it's different. But if you can go in and say, maybe it's like that with the SolidWorks, which version do you work with, or which versions? How, but I would keep it nice and clean and wait for them to ask you a little bit more questions, because your 3 may be a 5 or a 6 at best. So don't sell yourself short. Just put the versions that you're, and the other thing too is I can tell with a version 9 or version 11, how updated your skills really are.
Also, I want to say thank you for asking a question. I love it when people ask questions.
So as far as softs, because I noticed y'all mentioned leadership and communication. Do y'all think it's important to list these skills on the resume or not necessarily? Maybe you look for the technical skills more. What's your take on that?
For me personally, if I'm listing soft skills on my resume, so great example, I was the campus coordinator for Turning Point USA at UTD. That was on my resume. I put it under like a section where it was like I had a leadership section and I put that in there. But I had something to back it up. I'm not just gonna put like skill leadership. I showed an example of how I did that, or I was whatever I did in undergrad, that was like with my pre-med group, I was an officer, and so I put that in there. So I would put it on there, but put it in a section to where you can kind of show yourself off a little bit. You are your best hype man. So show off that experience. If you started a group, if you were a part of a group, put that in some section on your resume so they see a little bit more of your personality rather than just, I went to UTD, I studied engineering, and now I need a job. They want to know who they're hiring because they're going to have to work with you every day. So I'd say definitely include it, but make sure you have like those examples ready to go.
Yeah, and if they're not necessarily in your resume, like that still goes into the time when you have the conversation set up with the hiring manager or the recruiter or the HR team, like use that time to sell yourself. Like obviously your technical skill sets are on your resume for them to see, and they're going to want to know what you've done within each of those skill sets to make sure that you're technically a good fit for the job. But use that time to sell yourself and tell them what differentiates you from the next person. So, and if you're talking and you're wowing the recruiter, that is going to be one of the talking points that I put in my write-up. Like, yes, it's like, hey, he's good, he or she is good in this, and this. Also was great talking on the phone. Really think it'd be a good culture fit for your team. Like, what was asking questions, like no problem working with other groups. And like that stuff does go into it. So like that might match something like if I turn in 2 resumes to a team that has tons of experience, but they weren't communicating well. And if they had that video interview and they're just very standoffish or not open to talking. And I'm not saying that if you have an accent or you have, it's not that easy, like they're understanding about that. That's not what we're talking about. It's the being personable and being able to be excited about talking about what you do.
Yes.
So just at least show that in the resume and wow them that way. If like, because that's going to differentiate you between technical skill, technical skill, technical skill, technical skill.
I agree with that. And I also agree too, to have a really good energy when you're talking with people over the phone.
Yes.
And it just, you don't want to go in there and be monotone or be so polite that you come across as just milquetoast. You don't want to do that. It's really important to have some happy conversation. Be excited and share that and be humble.
You also, one of the things that I don't want to be like bear bad news, and you're also talking to someone who like, I actually enjoy talking to people, like if it was like someone telling me about their background. But also remember that when you do set up a time and a conversation, speaks with one of us about a job opportunity, don't, I'm not saying waste your 15, 20 minutes of that call telling us your life story. And it's not that we
Yeah.
don't care, we might not, to be honest, a lot of people will say that they actually don't care. But like, and it's good, find some way to balance what like your life story is, unless it's just the coolest life story that I've ever heard, which maybe for some of you it is, but just make sure that you don't waste the time, because if you start going on a tangent about this, that, and that, your recruiters probably stopped listening to you on the important stuff in the conversation, and you won't actually understand what the job's about, what the opportunity is. Like, you won't get what you need out of that conversation during that time, and we're probably not setting up the additional to go through. So I would just be careful, and when you go on a tangent about like your life story or why something may mean something, have like a kind of a track on what you want to tailor your experience to like what your skill set is. Like, just gotta be
Always-
careful with that.
Always
Yes.
bring it back.
Yes.
Always bring it back to, I have this skill, this is how I have this skill, this is how I'm going to apply it to this position. So kind of having like, there's a method to your madness. Like, we want to know about you as a person, we really do, because we're hiring people, we're not hiring robots. But just make sure that you're able to keep it concise, because like Colton said, eventually we get to the point where we've got 5 calls in a row. And we've heard everyone's life story, and then we go to lunch and we're like, we don't remember like the first 3 people that we talked to.
We don't want the manager to have to go through it too. So you gotta remember, we know how busy our managers are and how busy you are. It's like, if you just did that to us in our busy days, like, it's like, you're probably gonna do that same thing to the client. And it's like, I don't want to waste their time or think that we're sending them someone that's gonna waste their time, even if they may be great in the skill sets. Like, and we'll be coachable too, if we notice that in your conversation that
will
you're maybe
gladly prep you.
dragging, we'll be like,
We
hey,
will do
like,
some
I
interview
might
prep.
focus in and calm it down on that, and maybe focus in on more on this rather than. But
Yes, less is more. And then I would call Colton and say, well, I think the person is okay if they talk so much. And if you had to say a pet peeve, that's mine. I
It is,
hate
it's.
that.
I wish I could say that was my pet peeve. I think I just have been in the South too long, that I'm used to it, and I do this thing where I just kind of sit on the phone and I feel bad cutting people off still.
Me too. But you know, it's, think about the next step. If you let that person go to the manager, that's our job. We can't do that. And it's our job to people too, to help them in a kind way.
Yeah.
But it's real hard to tell, here I'm doing the very thing. But it's hard to tell someone you need to keep it brief. Just keep it brief. But it's helpful, I think.
Just match the energy of the person you're talking to.
100%.
As easy as it can go. If they're really bubbly, try and be a little bit more bubbly with them, or at least like be a little bit more upbeat with your answers. If you got someone being direct, like give them direct answers. Like, just try and match that a little bit.
Yeah.
That can always help with just kind of matching up personality types, or.
I feel like that helps us a lot in our current job.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, you don't want to be a downer. You don't want to talk about negative things like, I can't test well. Don't ever say that. Or if you have a job, if you, for some reason, had to leave that, leave your personal problems out. This is not the appropriate place to do that.
We don't know, or we don't know what you don't know. Like, so you, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to tell us stuff that we may not want to know. We're not going to know that information.
Yeah.
Keep that out.
Didn't realize like the not wanting to cut off people thing was a southern thing, and I was thinking about it every time. I was like, oh my god. Try to open the floor again to questions. Get on fire.
You said about like trying to match the energy of like the person you're talking to, but sometimes when I'm on like the phone with someone, I just like got like kind of nervous and like I breathe up and then I forgot what to say. Do you have any tips on like how to like not be so nervous?
Yeah, I guess what I would say to that maybe is like, just take your time. Like, I know it may seem awkward when there's like silence to something, but we also understand that like, we're trying to get information out of you and we also want the best answer from you as well. So like, when you're like in those conversations, like having the ability to kind of pause and like let yourself breathe is never a problem. Like, we're not gonna look at you like you're dumb because you're not talking to us. Like, now maybe don't be weird about it and just like sit there and stare, but like, you can always take some time to like gather your thoughts and like, hold on to. And something you can even tell them is like, oh, that's a great question. Like, if you don't mind, give me a second, like, what do you think? I'd like to think of an answer. Like, don't be too adamant in using that because we obviously want you to be quick on your feet to think on what's gonna be the best answer, but just that pause isn't as bad as you think it is when you're trying to think of your next thing to say, and that pause internally is not gonna be as actually long as you think it might feel. And that sometimes is a good way to kind of like take a deep breath as you're thinking and letting those thoughts gather to then move on and either ask another question. And also, if you don't know what to say, the easiest way, and it's what I do in my job when I'm talking to VPs that know way more about what I'm trying to sell to them than I do, is whenever I don't know that next thing, is just asking another question to them. So like, if you're stumped and you don't know what to do, you don't know how to answer that question, just ask them like, hey, can you clarify that a little bit more? Or like, hey, why is that? Or why is always a big thing to ask too. So maybe just ask another question to them to help ease those nerves and get them talking a little bit more to where then you can kind of find your breath to make the correct talking point.
That's a good point. That's real good. I think to be prepared is going to be probably one of the best things. Be prepared about what the company does. Have that job description there, have your resume there. Anticipate what kind of questions they might ask you. Because I think if you're prepared, it's always scary. And I think for recruiters, most of the time, particularly with someone that's straight coming right out of school, we know you're nervous. We know it's scary. And you know, the other thing too, is that a lot of times the person who's on the other side of the phone, they're not comfortable doing a lot of questioning either. So just keep that in mind. They may be a little bit nervous too. And what I was saying here, the last time I was here, even if it's on Zoom, look at a person right here. They think you're looking right in your eyes. And you want to always have contact. You don't want to be looking around or shuffling or any of that. Hold something in your hand that you can just kind of, you know, maybe it's stone or a towel or so I don't know, a pen, something, but don't click it. You know, just have your little comfort there. When, you know, that's a good thing about being on Zoom. No one knows. But I think the main things are just to be prepared, understand the other person on the other side. They may feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's what I would do. And the other thing too is that I think that's a great point about to slow the conversation down. You know, an athlete, I've started playing this new sport. When the ball comes too fast, slow it down, give it a chance to reset. So he had some great tips there. But I can tell you from an engineering manager standpoint that when they ask you a question that you don't know, they want to see that you are not going to fold. So they on purpose can ask you something that might be a little bit harder. And when that happens, just try anyway. Even if I would say something like, well, I'm not really sure on that, but I'd like to take a try. Because that's what a company is hiring you for when you're coming straight out of school is your potential. And this can-do attitude and all these other things we're talking about. So, you know, what the heck, give it a try. And don't ever, ever, ever look up on Google what the answer is. Don't ever do that.
I would say, and I'm gonna go the complete opposite of both of these two and just go from like things that I still personally do, because you asked about like tips to make yourself less nervous. First of all, what is your name?
Tim John.
I'm gonna butcher that, so I am so sorry. Nice to meet you. I appreciate you asking questions. Ask questions, but before, if I'm getting on a call and I'm really nervous, I'm meeting a VP or a C-suite and I'm on Zoom. Talk to yourself in the mirror, hype yourself up in the mirror. I will physically jump up and down and like shake out all of my nerves because that just makes me feel better. It makes me feel like I'm going in a little bit looser. Obviously, I'm very loud. I have a lot of energy all the time. So I will sit here and I'll kind of shake it out and I'll be like, okay, this is fine. Always remember the people that you're talking to are just that. They're just people. You're talking to Colton and I. We're not very far out of school. Anytime that I'm talking with someone, even whenever I'm on a meeting with Colton, if I'm talking to someone who's a little bit higher up in a company and I'm kind of nervous, I'm like, okay, think about it like this. That's someone's parent, someone's mom, someone's dad. They have kids that are in school. They're around to their 17-year-old son all the time. So they got bigger problems than me. And try to bring it back to people are relatable. What is going to make you relate to this person? That goes along with her being prepared. You can Google or LinkedIn just about anyone now. Prepare yourself for who you're talking to. And like if you and I were having a conversation, you can always bring up, hey, I saw that you went to UTD. I'm a student here right now. And then that's going to give us something to like touch base on. That's going to make it a little bit less scary and like nerve-wracking for you.
That's a good point.
I get nervous on a lot of my calls still. So it's like,
Yeah,
it's a very normal human thing.
and to kind of go off of that too, just quick, with like the like jumping up and down and breathing. It is, you may think it's dumb and like that you don't do it. Like I've been on hundreds of meetings with high level people in our job that we've been going through. And like if I have like a big meeting going through before too, I know you've probably seen it on like TV shows, but like that like standing up and like
The
almost like
power
a
pose.
superhuman power person pose. For me, it's like I don't get like nerves necessarily as much. I'm kind of blessed with that, which is nice. But like as far as like if y'all haven't told, I talk pretty quick. And so a lot of my goal is to slow myself down. And when I am slow and gather my thoughts, it usually comes to me all right when I'm trying to get out my point. So like that standing up and like actually like opening up and taking deep breaths is like good about like calming down the body and like setting nerves that are good for you. But so I emphasis on that, but it's actually not a bad thing to do and we'll do it before meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
And have a joke with it too. It's not weird. Like
Okay.
maybe don't do it in front of a bunch of people, but like, Yeah,
I
you
used
might
to
get some
bounce
weird
up and
looks,
down
but
with
yeah.
like one of the yoga balls instead of my chair. I would sit here and do this because we can't, both of us personally cannot sit still and we work right across from each other. So that's a bad idea, but makes the office fun.
We've got a lot of energy.
We do.
Try to.
We try to. That's good. We need it. This job is exhausting. Kind of
Yeah,
questions.
no, here.
Do you ever reject a candidate because of his answers on behavioral type questions, even though he is very good in technical questions?
Yes. Now, you're going to ask an example.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all go, let me think.
Yeah, I mean, she's not wrong. Like if you like if you're not gonna be a behavioral fit, and now this is also different, kind of depend on what type of job you want.
Yeah.
So like if maybe you have a tougher time meshing with people, or like maybe it's tougher for you to grow at that, and maybe you need more time out in the workforce to kind of get understanding of what it looks like to work with a larger company and how you need to interact with your team members. Maybe you need to have that experience. Maybe look into working a contract type job. And it kind of varies, like if I have a full-time job that I'm working and placing someone, your behavioral and like cultural background is going to be a big part of what like I'm talking about, because you've got to work day to day with this team members and you're not going anywhere afterwards. Or at least the hopeful goal is that you stay in that job for a long-term period. But with like a contract, we're not as adamant on looking about like if you can speak to other team members and stuff like that, because you are in there to use your technical skill set to do a job. You're on contract there and then you leave and go to a contract in their spot. So that's be the only time that I'd say it may not be as important of a factor. But if you are looking to be like on a contract to hire where you are going to go there, or it's just a direct placement into that organization, we would want to have that background, and we'll work with you too. And if you have a problem with that, be upfront with that, maybe with your recruiter. Like if you tell me that like, hey, like I have a really good technical background, I've done this, and this, and you can tell me your experience, but you're like, I have trouble with the other part. tell them that. They're not gonna, if you're upfront with it and you give them the opportunity to like either coach you up or share what the team, and what, if you ask that question, like, hey, what is the team like that I'm interviewing? If I did my due diligence as an account executive working with my clients, I'm gonna know what their team is made of. I'm gonna know what the characteristics of a manager, a supervisor are, and you can ask me that. Like, hey, what do the people look like that you're gonna work with? And I can break down that, and it might make you feel a bit more comfortable with like the situation. So I'd maybe just kind of break it down and ask what things are like, but
The contract, it's a really good point.
yeah.
I think that is too. I would say I'm sitting here listening, but I'm thinking too. I think one example that I can say from my son who graduated from school, I guess a year or two ago, he works for a company to where every night they can't leave until midnight or 1, 2, 3 in the morning. So it's going to be important in that company. They want to know that a person can persevere and that there's no problem with work-life balance. So if I were to ask you, well, tell me, typically these behavioral questions are like this. Tell me about a time that you had to deal with being on a project for an extended amount of time. How did you deal with that? And if you were to say, oh, well, I really had a hard time with it. I couldn't get along with the people on my team. And they needed me to put in more hours that I just really couldn't give or I didn't want to give. Now, for that particular company, hearing that response, I wouldn't want to hire you, no matter how smart you are or how skilled you are, because the culture is not going to mesh with what your background is. So that's why I think it's really good to ask questions about the culture of the company when you can, because you're the only one that knows what's the best fit for you. And sometimes I think it does take time to get out in the workforce and figure out what you don't like versus what you do like. But the kind of questions that we typically will ask, or we did, or how you did on a project, how you dealt with stress, how you got along with other people, work-life balance, that kind of stuff. There's a myriad of questions and things that you look online. I'm sure you found other things too.
Always be honest on those questions too.
Yes.
Don't just try to tailor your answers to what you think that company wants to hear. One, because you might be wrong. Two, because you're gonna get in there and it's not gonna be a good fit, and that could have been something that could have been avoided. As far as like, I've had recently people who I love their experience, I love their background, but I have an awesome relationship with my hiring manager, and I know she specifically said, hey, I want to go be able to have a happy hour with my team. And if I know that that's kind of the culture of that team, and like our job, like come work with us, like we're going to the state fair with our job today. So whenever we look for people to work with us, we look for people who are okay with hanging out with their coworkers outside of work and making sure that it is so important for you to make sure that that culture fits you, because there's so many other jobs that will. So make sure to be honest. That's a time whenever I always like to tell my candidates, like, be selfish on that one. Make sure you're putting yourself first. I understand that coming out of college, really all we want is a job. We want someone to give us a chance. Someone will give you that chance, but be a little bit picky to make sure that it's something that you can stay in for an extended period of time.
So what would you say is extended amount of time for them when they're first coming out?
I would say like 1 to 2 years. Like stay at a job for a minimum of 1 to 2 years. I would say preferably 2 years. Get some really good experience, build those good relationships, never ever burn bridges. Never burn bridges, because you don't know, that manager that you sassed off to that one time might be your director at your next job. And there are going to be people you just don't get along with, and that is okay. You do not have to be everyone's best friend. You do have to be respectful of everybody that you work with.
And it's all new.
Yeah.
If you've never had a job before, or even the kind of job that you've had while you've been going to school, it's going to be different. So give yourself a break.
Mm-hmm. Take a walk.
Yeah, take a breath.
And also another thing too, on like, just like the going into it, like the behavioral style and just like the more so of being able to match energies and be able to mold to the person that you're talking to. You gotta remember too that they understand your background and what you went to school for, what you're looking to do after school. Like they understand that because you're blessed technically and have the skill sets and you went through the engineering program, you're not trying to go into sales. Like you're not like me. If you put me in a technical situation, I don't know what I'm doing, but I am able to talk about it. So, and like, so it's like they understand that you're not going out for a sales role. So they understand that there might be some uncomfortability in that conversation, but just being true to yourself in that is like fine, and just like, yeah, not showing that bad attitude, but they know you're not going into sales. So like, just be comfortable in knowing that they're not expecting you to be the most outgoing spokesperson that there is to join their teams. Now, it always helps. And if you're not having the ability, and when you're in those conversations, I know a lot of things is like, they'll ask you a question or like, she did that. She gave you an example of like, give me an example of a time that you disagreed with your coworker and how you handled that. I would always like, if you have trouble of coming up with stuff like off the top of your head in the middle of like a meeting or an interview or any of those processes, write down and like have like 3 different scenarios that you can always pivot back to. Yeah, there we go. Pivot back to when you're stumped on a question. It's like have a couple different studies of where you showed leadership or you persevered through a different situation or you disagreed with someone, and have a few of those ideas floating in your background. That way you can kind of turn to those, because all interviews are going to ask similar style questions. But if you have a good base of what you know that they might ask and what like behaviorally they would look for, you can start to mold some of those questions based off what you feel for those. So like,
Yeah. And that goes back to you're being prepared. Prepare technically, but also prepare for those questions where they're gonna ask you about. Tell me about a time when, and we all hate those questions. I know we all do. Take 20 minutes out of your day, go on Google, look up common interview questions, and I had a running Word document of like answers to common interview questions, especially the behavioral ones, because those were always like my hard ones off the top of my head. Because you're in an interview and then you forget your name whenever they ask you a question. And so have that Word document. The beautiful thing about Zoom, you can have that Word doc up on the side and you can say, oh, and you can like go back to whenever you rehearse that Word document a bunch the night before your interview, because you were a great candidate and you're prepared. You can kind of go back to that and be like, oh yeah, there was that time when, because I already had it written down. I thought about it. I was prepared. And then you don't have to remember the projects that you did your freshman year of college, because you already put pen to paper and you gave yourself that example. So you had it ready to go.
You know, I remember,
I am really sorry I have to cut it off because we actually are at time. I know that some of them have to go to class. But thank you very much. And if anybody does want to hang out afterwards, I'm sure they will continue taking a few more questions. But yeah, we have to cut it. I'm sorry. Thank you all for joining us. Could you go to the next slide up there? Just advance the slide on the keyboard. On the keyboard. So if you all don't mind, if you can give us some feedback really quick, just using that QR code, it's just like a few questions. We would really appreciate it. Next Friday, we will have our writing workshop. So we'll come up with a list of things to watch for when on your common writing. But we will also work through any documents that you bring. If you want to work while we're here, we can do that. There will be pizza. It's from 12 to 2 in the same room, and then the actual career fair. And we will do our drawing really quick and we'll be done. So, all right, let me get set up. Oh, that's not cool. Okay.